Hey, everybody. It is another fun episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. It's me, your co-host, Richard Harris, along with my good friend, Scott Leese, who is joining us. We are super excited about Surf and Sales. As always, if you haven't gone to check out the event, you should. You should check out the website, surfandsales.com. May is sold out. We've got spots in November and December, or November set up for us. I'm just going to see if I don't mess something up, but there you go, Scott. I already did.
Okay, I got excited at the prospect of going to Costa Rica in December as well. So
yeah, well, maybe we'll make that happen. We want to give obviously a big thanks to our sponsors of Scratchpad and Sendoso so much. We appreciate them so much for what they do to help us spread the word and get good ideas and content out to you, as well as their services. So if you are looking to improve without answering my doorbell, which I have no idea who it is, then please check out our two sponsors for this month. All right, that was a very long intro, and now I'm going to introduce our guest, Andrew Newcomb, who is a very long time sales leader, and he's been at Intuit for a very long time. In fact, he did what looks like I want to talk about is maybe he did a rebound. Is that right? You started it Intuit, or you were at Intuit and you left and you came back?
No, I've pretty much been here that entire 20 years. I left for about a year as part of a divestiture. So Intuit sold a product called QuickBase. And I, of course, went along with the package, but then came back about a year later.
Okay. And was that sort of their attempt to roll out a startup, like pull something out and sort of, let it go a little more independent?
Yeah, it was basically one of those things. So QuickBase was more of an enterprise type of solution. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it really wasn't fitting into the overall strategy. So they just spun it off. They actually spun off Quicken at the same time, which was more of a consumer product. That was what Intuit got started with, was Quicken.
Right.
But those two were divested at the exact same time.
Got it. I totally understand. And you've done everything from being a sales manager to being an account executive to now you're just defined as a sales leader. What is your role these days?
Yeah, I'm a senior sales leader, so I do carry a quota. I've got a team of 10 that's growing, but I'm also spending a lot of my time helping to coach coaches as well. So I spend a lot of time with helping them build rigor into their coaching processes and things like that. So a little bit more of a senior role.
Yeah. What does that mean, build rigor into their coaching process? It's a good buzzword.
Yeah. So, just in terms of using systems and tools to better documentation, a more efficient approach. I'm a one behavior at a time kind of manager or coach, whereas, a lot of coaches are trying to hit very shallow on everything. I like to try to find kind of that pivotal behavior that's either driving or not driving results at any given time, and really hunker down.
That, right? Like, what's an example of you finding that one behavior versus, I love what you said about the surface level sort of, that piece where I think a lot of us sometimes spend too much time there.
Yeah. So, for example, I've spent 6 months to 8 months at different times on upfront contracts. So, from the Sandler methodology, if a sales conversation gets kicked off poorly, and the salesperson is not in control, is not teeing it up, is not kind of doing the heavy lifting to ensure that the structure of that conversation is productive, really the rest of it goes to pot. You're just kind of all over the map. It's not clear what the real goal of the call is. And so, yeah, I've spent months with an entire team on upfront contract just because I know it's a building block that will make everything else better downstream.
Yeah, I hear this all the time where people come to me and they say, we need, negotiation and closing skills training. And I'm like, yeah, I think you need better qualification and discovery. Yeah. And in order to do that, you got to get to the spot to earn the right, to ask those questions. So I'm with you on starting that value conversation much, much higher. So It makes total sense.
What do you think people get wrong about coaching coaches?
Ooh, that's a great question.
That is good.
I think probably what happens is one of two things. Either they go too light in terms of I I guess the added responsibility or the bump in title goes to the head, and you kind of go a little too hands off, and you don't do quite as much inspection as you might with, an individual contributor, or your ego gets the better of you and you just try to dictate, like you don't stay true to the processes that worked very effectively for individual contributors. And in my experience, the process works equally effective whether it's a frontline, individual contributor or a coach. So I think maybe the pendulum swings in one of those two extreme directions.
Do you think the propensity for being inconsistent with it is one of the challenges? I think if you ask most people how often should you be coaching your reps, people would say every single day. But I think if you ask somebody who's coaching other coaches, they don't make time for it every single day. And it's more of like a once every couple days or once a week, we have this kind of meeting. Like, do you think that when you're coaching coaches, people are too hands off and the consistency of the coaching is not there?
Yeah, I do. I do think that's the case. And I don't know if it's, certainly you start getting into as well, am I going to upset this coach if I spend this much time with them? And they start to kind of equate that, oh, I must not be very good at coaching, and that's why they're spending every day with me or every other day with me. I do think that's a factor. I think people are maybe a little bit worried about hurting people's feelings, but for me, it's still, as long as the objective is clear, as long as you're communicating and establishing rapport with that coach, that shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't let that get in the way of whatever needs to be done to make them a better coach.
Let's play a little game here in the spirit of potentially hurting people's feelings.
That means Richard, by the way.
No, that means me as well. So you don't know Richard very well, right? And you know me a little bit, right? Okay.
Yep.
How do you think Richard likes to be coached, and how do you think I like to be coached? How would you coach us?
I wouldn't until I have a conversation with you.
Well, we've had conversations before. Come on, play the game. Humor me a little bit.
So you're asking me to decide my approach to coaching you, even though we barely know each other?
Yep.
Yes, based on many interactions or observances of me, my personality, who I am, things I do, things I say. Yeah.
That's not my normal approach. I normally do quite a bit of inventory on what the skill set is so that I make sure I'm spending time in the right place.
Yeah. Which is probably the better way to do it. But now just humor me. Imagine there's a world where you don't have that option to take that long, or you don't have this information. You only have a little bit or almost nothing.
Well, so you're a pretty assertive guy, kind of aggressive. So I would probably try to come at you and just ask you right up front, what do you want to work on? And see what comes out of that. And, it doesn't hurt to give it a go and see if I cater to your personality and we just jump right in and get after it, we can always course correct.
Yeah.
So I think I would probably take that approach with you. I barely know Richard in just the time we were warming up when he was getting things set up. Maybe just a little bit more inquiry, a little bit more, where do you think things are going well? Where do you think things are going not so well? Maybe just not quite as assertive as I would with you.
What do you
hopefully
think,
that
Richard? How did he do? Did he get it right for both of us?
I think he got it right for you. Like I even saw you smiled. You were glad to hear him say, "Hey, I'm going to ask you what you want," because that is also your style of like, "Hey, before I just launch into it," right? So he nailed that about you.
I think he nailed mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's flip it. How do you think he did with me? And granted, he doesn't know me.
I actually think he did pretty good. I think that you are pretty direct as well, but you like a little more finesse, a little more detail, a little more room for like a discussion kind of thing. Talk it out, a little more talk it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I have another question for you off of this, Andrew. Thanks for playing the game.
It was fun. It actually it was a great question because it is part of being an effective coach. Reading people, getting into the tiny nuances of a person's personality can really separate mediocre from great. So I actually really enjoyed the question. I was challenged, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's one thing you can tell me if you've ever heard this, but I've worked with this woman who does some hostage negotiation stuff, but she now uses it for training lawyers and salespeople, that it's all in the eyebrows. You should watch someone's eyebrows for body language because you don't ever control your eyebrows. We've all been taught to sit still, right? There you go. Like, so I thought that's something you could walk away with.
Great.
But one thing,
my eyes right now.
What's that?
I want to go put some dark sunglasses on or something.
Exactly.
Shave your eyebrows.
Yeah, shave my eyebrows. Yeah.
But here's what you said before we got into this is like, well, I'd like to dig into their skill set first, right? Which I think we all do, right? Whether it's a rep or a manager. But when you're thinking about coaching a coach and you're looking at managers who manage other people, what are the skill sets you're looking for? They're similar, but sometimes they're different.
Well, just spitballing off the top of my head, a big one is: are you effectively listening to your folks both in their job and when they're in a coaching session with you, or are you waiting to say your next thing? That's a pretty big one. Other things might be, again, it's the documentation piece. So documenting, and there's a lot of reasons for documentation, right? One of them would be to see the journey and to be able to go back and celebrate when you get to where you want to go. But also with coaching, naturally, when things don't go as you intended, you have that documentation in case other processes need to be, entered into, like performance management and things like that. And so I've seen that wreck a coach too, where they spend 6 months and then, like, yeah, Andrew, I don't think this is going to work out, but now you got to start all over because now you got to document to make sure you can show that, no, I've put in the time and I'm not just saying that, here's the proof. So that's another big one for coaches is the documentation piece.
Scott, he has 6 months, 6 months to figure it out.
It's just arbitrary number.
I know, but it's a big company Intuit kind of approach, right? So Scott and I are like,
we would have 6 days, Richard, by comparison.
Dude, I worked at a place once where it's like, I mean, it was high turnover anyway, but if I told them at 3 o'clock they needed to do something a certain way on the phone, and if I heard it by 5 o'clock and they didn't, they were gone. Like that was how fast we documented. But that was an old school newspaper cold call center. So,
wild west of sales.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? So adult learning is obviously very different. And there's also, depending on your company, there can be a heck of a lot of noise going on in the role. What do you guys think is a fair amount of time for adults to learn, especially like moderate to advanced skill sets?
God, that's a great question.
Skill set. Now, are we talking about like as pertains to sales and selling, or are you asking me like how long would it take me to learn how to be a carpenter?
Sales. So, okay, if you think about
just making sure, because it would take me a decade to learn how to do anything adult-like in real life. But I just wanted to confirm we're talking about sales here. So
totally sales behavior. So things like here's one that for me I still haven't figured out how long you should give someone to figure this out. But when you're in sales, is hearing what the client is not saying. You know what I mean? So it's easy to say, okay, they said this, so I responded and said this, but the great ones can read between the lines and they get information out of what's not being said.
Man, is that teachable? Do you guys think that's teachable?
I do.
I do.
I got to think about that.
But it's teachable. And I'll explain why I think so, and then you guys can tear it down. But I also don't know how it's documentable, for lack of a better phrase, right? Because we all have our own biases on what we hear. So the first thing is, if you know your product or service and you know your pitch and you know the 5 common objections of competition, budget, etc., once you have that down, you should then be able to better listen. The challenge is, and I say this all the time, like the value of scripts, whether they're micro scripts, whole scripts, is that you don't have to think. And because you don't have to think, you now can look for body language. You now can look for a pause or that eyebrow or that inquisitive piece. Like even Andrew, when you said, oh, that's a good question, you did the look up to the side while you were thinking about it. And so if you know what you're saying and you got it down, you can coach to that, right? But I also think you can say, you can also coach your reps to say, hey, I noticed a slight hesitation. There's something maybe that I didn't think about. I also think that, Scott knows this about me too, is that I'm all about feeling, right? Like I deliver price and the next question immediately is, how does that pricing feel? And it's the best example of what you're talking about because they don't know how to answer that. They pause, they think, because pricing is an emotional piece. So I think you can coach to these moments. But I also think too, like Andrew, how big are your sales deals on average? I mean, they 6-figure, 7-figure?
No, 4 to 5 figure.
Okay, so they're on a sort of SMB mid-market size piece.
SMB, yeah.
Part of it also is if you're teaching it is when you have calls, you have 2 or 3 people and everybody knows their role, right? If I'm the person delivering the deck, I can't look for body language.
Mm-hmm.
I need someone else to do that.
Yeah.
The other way you can coach to it also is, particularly in a virtual world is, I could have 2 people sitting here just listening to this conversation. You wouldn't know it. And afterwards we debrief and we'd be able to say, what did you hear? What did you hear? And that gives the person who was leading the call a perspective of, oh, I didn't catch that. Yeah. So it's, I don't know that you can say, oh, there are certain places you could say every time this comes up, here's what you should notice and say, but then you just have to sort of exercise the muscle.
Yeah.
So answer.
It's a fascinating topic. And what I've been trying to do lately with my folks is get a little bit more out of the X's and O's of salesmen. Like, this is discovery. That was a great question. And actually saying, like if we're looking at a sales chat, and the client says something and my bells go off, it's just asking them, what can you possibly glean from that statement? Give me everything you got in your mind. Yeah. That can be effective, but to Scott's point, I don't know that I can really pinpoint a time where I've been able to make that second nature to someone.
Yeah.
I think you can nurse them along, but
let me ask you, Andrew, is it second nature for you?
It is.
When do you think you acquired that skill? Go all the way back.
Well, it's an interesting topic. So I've been actually classified as an HSP. It's this thing, highly sensitive person, where you're extremely dialed into people's emotions, where you're convinced that you know how
I'm
they're
HSP,
feeling.
But I don't pay attention to anybody else's emotions, just my own.
Okay, so I do. I've always done that, even as a kid. And I've just found that it's actually come in really handy in my sales career. So I think it goes way, way back before
Scott,
sales.
Who in my family is an HSP?
Who in your family is a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, who pays attention to everybody else's emotions?
Yeah, it's not you.
No. But who is it?
Who is it? It's got to be Kathy.
Yes,
yeah.
My wife. Like, it's her greatest asset.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, she is so good at that for me, which is great. So then, to your point, how do you teach people to pay more attention or better attention?
Yeah. Well, it's also fascinating to think about, is there a recruiting tool that can find HSPs?
Yes.
Because then you've got a real edge, right?
Well, it depends what you're recruiting for. Are HSPs an ideal candidate for account executives, or are they an ideal candidate for sales leadership?
I think that comes in handy in both. That's my opinion.
That's interesting. Where does one go get a test to be an HSP? Is there something online?
Richard, I can tell you right now, you're not one.
I know that.
You have already failed the test. Okay.
Well, the science behind it, and maybe this is bullshit, I don't know, but they say that about 25% of the population has this genetic situation where if you were back in the Stone Ages, people like me would be the one who would see the tiger first and let the rest of the village know. And
Yeah.
I would just have my radar would be up all the time. I'd be
You're
that
always
guy.
scanning everything when you walk down the street.
Yeah. Anticipating the next three things you're going to say. So I'm ready, that kind of thing.
That's why, but and in fairness, Scott is that HSP. I mean, I don't know if you see yourself
Might
that
be.
way.
Yeah, I might be.
Are you HSP?
I've never had the test, but everything that you're saying makes me think I must be.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
Now, it's interesting when we call each other for advice. I'm like, hey, Scott, why shouldn't I do this? And he's like, well, you're not seeing this whole perspective, right? Scott gets to me and he's like, okay, tactically, what happened here? What's going on? And again, I think it's part of our balance and why we enjoy working together.
I think I also, Andrew, which is maybe why it's not apparent to you, but I also feel like I shut that door off aggressively sometimes because otherwise it's too much.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I can't handle all of the noise and all of the energy or all of the motion. And so I'm just like, no. And so I put up a front that's just like, no, I'm not that way. I have no feelings whatsoever. I even joke about it sometimes on, the podcast or Thursday Night Sales. And I'm like, I got a cold, dead heart. And you start to see,
it's bullshit.
Yeah, see, you're like, that's bullshit. But that's my like defense trigger to be like, no, I don't want to talk about all these feelings and emotions. No.
Well, that's really good to an extent, because in the book I'm reading about this trait is HSPs get really, really exhausted and really overwhelmed because even when you don't realize it unconsciously, like if you're at a party with 15 people, it's like you're hearing all 15 of all 7 of the conversations that are going on.
Yeah.
The pretty good detail of each of those, and your brain gets tired. So if you can shut that off, that's actually a really, really good skill that maybe I could learn from you, because I don't do a very good job of cutting it off.
I can tell you how I did that. I got really shitty ears and I've had multiple ear surgeries and have bad hearing. And so there's times where I'm like, I take out my hearing aid and I'm like, honey, talking time is over.
That is happening. So maybe that will help me out in that sense.
What tactical shift have you had to make in the way that you manage your team in the last 6 months, let's say?
Okay. So I have a really good answer for this. So they actually brought me over to chat sales in the last 6 months. And the tactical shift that I had to make was these guys were very hell-bent on staying in chat. And what I learned is...
Hold on. You mean using chat to sell chat?
Using chat to sell our solutions.
Yeah.
So someone comes in through the website, and, hey, I'm on your website.
Like imagine Drift selling Drift in a chat.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I noticed very quickly, it took me a while to think about it, was, you lose all home field advantage in chat sales because you don't have tone even. So I went from the phone where I at least had tone and I had pauses and I had hmms, and that's gone, and you lose all the social expectations. So someone can string you along and get all the information out of you they want 60 minutes later and just drop the chat. And so I started comparing it to football. Like, okay, they totally have home field advantage. They can come in here and do whatever they want, ask whatever they want, make themselves feel good about buying it or not buying it or buying the wrong one, and then bail. And so the shift that I've made is you need to pick up the phone more often than not and just view chat as where the leads started. It doesn't have to finish in chat. I don't care if they want to close on Mars, at a diner, in a car, at the mall. You go where the money goes and you go where the conversation is going to be the most effective. And so that's been it's actually been a little frustrating, but also really fun to see it validated.
What are those transitions, right? Like I call them transition statements, right? That you're having this great conversation on chat and you realize there's a lot more that needs to be discussed, but this person thinks it's transactional, right? Like you think they're buying a pack of gum.
Yep.
What do you coach your teams, for those who are listening, to say to the customer that's in chat to say, hey, maybe we should schedule a call?
just that. So, hey, Scott, I'm not sure that this chat is going to do this conversation justice. And, I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. This typically works better if I pick up the phone. Are you cool with that? And then boom. Yeah. They're usually pretty cool about it.
That's great. What happens when someone says, no, I don't have time? Like this, I just want to role play this out a little bit, right? Because everybody's got this scenario.
Well, there's different meanings and intentions behind that statement. Some person saying that is just giving you the runaround. They're really not serious. But if they're serious, then you say, then you make an appointment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, well, the options are to rush through this now, whether we be on the chat or the phone. It sounds like you really want to think through this, so let's do it justice and let's get time and a date and an agenda together to talk about this properly. And their answer to that's going to tell you everything you need to know. If they're resistant, then they probably weren't serious. Something's gone sideways.
Yeah.
If they agree, you've got a really good opportunity there usually.
Yeah.
A really strong opportunity.
How big is your team that handles chat? Because I mean, you guys are into it, so I assume there's people on your site.
How many chats are there active?
Right.
How many active chat leads are there at once? That's what I'm thinking.
2. And it's tough. It's tough.
Wow.
Because it's tough because the volume is a lot for 2 people to handle.
What I would say is if you're an excellent multitasker, it's probably okay. But I've tried it and it's not for me. Again, HSP, I want to be dialed into the one person in front of me, and I'm a bird in the hand kind of guy. So I just got overwhelmed easily doing it myself. I feel like I'm half-assing
sort of like I'm sort of picturing somebody who's playing chess across like 5 chessboards at once.
Yeah.
5 different opponents. You think you could tell the 5 people simultaneously at once and carry all those conversations in your head, Richard?
No, you know me, dude. I don't believe in multitasking. I don't think it's possible. So,
well, and that supposedly is a male-female thing. I don't know if that's been scientifically proven, but in terms of who handles multitasking better.
In my family, I'll agree with that statement. In the Me Too world, I don't know that I will. So
well, that's why I said science. I'll always go with science. But
so let's talk about are those 2 people just literally sitting at the computer all day in chat conversations and sales conversations?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a lot compared to an inside rep where they get a chance to breathe between phone calls and they get to,
I know,
sitting there. So.
I know it's a unique thing. It makes my skin crawl. I've got to get up and get on the phone, I just feel like that's where I prevail. Or more increasingly here, Zoom. Selling over Zoom is game changing.
Well, I think, it speaks to like knowing your strengths, right?
Yeah.
You're self-aware enough to know that role would be tough for you, but other people might enjoy that kind of thing. There's other people who feel really comfortable just like typing away selling.
Yeah, they do.
As opposed to being on the phone. Right? Yeah. They might see it as a lot less confrontational or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the rejection doesn't hurt as much because it's not even really a human. I can disconnect. I'm just like messaging somebody, God knows where. It could be a bot for all I know. I don't know.
All the above. Doesn't have to be an MSP. That's what he's saying. He doesn't have to worry about being MSP. HSP. Oh, sorry. So just out of curiosity, Andrew, you've had a long tenure at Intuit. You've been there for 8 or 9 years?
20
years. Oh, I only looked at the first half of your LinkedIn.
You only got through his,
What is that like? Like, I mean, do you ever sit back and go, man, nobody does this anymore? Do you ever, what makes you want to stay so long at it's a great company. Like there's no, I'm not trying to bash on it. It's unusual to find someone like you who's a lifer.
Well, he'll be the CEO soon because everybody else is going to disappear.
Yeah, just by attrition, I'll be the CEO.
By forced retirement.
Way to the top. He's going to survive his way to the top.
Right.
So this is going to be cheesy, and y'all are going to probably doubt my sincerity, but the cause truly means something to me. So it's very ironic. It's a big corporation, and yet we empower small businesses in a true and genuine way. We were all over the TV over the weekend with marketing and advertisement towards small business owners, and so I just really get a charge out of helping small businesses. Many of them are so focused on their innovation or their invention or what they provide that the things that we offer really fall by the wayside. And as you guys know, the people that make it beyond the 5-year mark in small business are the ones who dot all the I's and cross all the T's when it comes to managing their finances. There's still an alarming number of people who think that, oh, I have a bunch of money in the bank, so I'm successful. But they don't look at the P&L. And so, just having an opportunity to open people's eyes to that is really it's a really fun thing to do.
Scott, do you look at a P&L for your business?
You know the answer to that. Why you gotta put me on the spot? I have
Don't
somebody,
either.
I have somebody who looks at that. First of all, I don't have any losses.
Yeah, this is true.
Expenses, basically. So it's pretty quick.
So
Somebody else look at that.
So what made you, how long have you been in leadership versus an individual contributor?
Well, I started my leadership career back in 2008, and I've done a little bit of bouncing around. I've done some IC roles. I'm a friend of DeJuan Brown's, and I know he's been on the show before.
Yeah, I would love to.
And similar to him, I'll occasionally get an itch to just go back and serve on the front lines, and also Intuit has a pretty broad array of solutions, and so I've wanted to dip my toe into selling to different groups of folks. So
that's his pitch for being the CEO, Scott, right there.
That's right.
That
and the mission.
So what about you? What about management and leadership attracts you to it, right? Because we know not all reps are great managers or leaders, even if they want to be, and hopefully they learn that and move on. But what about it attracts you?
I'm a people helper, man. I get a lot of satisfaction out of being able to sit down and literally point to a piece of paper and say that, together we did this. Working together, we can clearly state with no hesitation that these results came as a result of my leadership and your execution on that. I also think that I have a lot of the intangibles that some leaders may not have. I do like to personally call and check on my folks on a personal level. I take that sort of part of the job very seriously. And I also enjoy the business aspect to it as well, the organization, the strategy, and I've said documentation a few times. I just enjoy all the variety of things that you have to get done correctly to be a good leader. It's kind of like a game, like a puzzle almost. I'm
terrible at all those things, and yet I've somehow established myself as a leader at certain levels. So let me ask you this. Scott knows this. I don't have any patience for shit.
I'm dying laughing.
So let's say one of your reps comes to you, right? And they say, hey, Andrew, you've been doing this a while, I already can tell that you're the kind of leader that your reps would approach you and say, if I want to get into leadership, what should I do? What are the things you tell them that isn't spoken about in leadership, right? Like, hey, before as you think about moving into leadership, here are the cool things, but here's the other stuff nobody has probably ever told you. That's the cruddy part of leadership.
Well, I think it's normal for most people who aspire to be leaders to think of the sexy stuff, the exciting stuff, and usually it involves making sure they understand their impact, what their impact is going to be on real human beings, whether it's positive or negative. I'll often share stories about situations I've had with people as a leader. Also we're in an environment where you can have everything buttoned up and all of a sudden, you're getting hit with something out of the blue, and you've got to have the calmness and the steadiness to get through those storms. I'm not going to go into great detail about that sort of stuff, but it's the controversial stuff that makes the news, making sure you're buttoned up, depending on what company you work for, but making sure you're buttoned up. And people can be a little too casual as leaders, and it only takes one little slip up in the wrong setting, to destroy you. That's just reality of it.
Richard's favorite conversations.
Yes.
HR conversations.
I was about to say, tell me about that slip up, but we're
When
a
are we
little
going to
bit
bring
on
an
time.
HR person onto the podcast, Richard?
Yes.
That would be a good show. That would be a good show. But the thing of it is, it's totally unpredictable anymore. Like, you don't know what's going to upset people, and so if you're going to get into
I
leadership,
just assume that everything is upsetting to everyone.
it's getting to be that. But I can tell you that I've had instances where I've been completely floored. That just really that I was thinking it was this other thing, but it's that. So I think that's just becoming more and more of a reality that people have to think about.
Definitely a challenge for anybody in leadership role or a position of any kind with some visibility to deal with. You know, you get your toe in the line, you're watching what you say, but you're trying to be authentic.
Yep.
Yeah,
It is a minefield.
it really is.
Tread cautiously is really good advice, man. So we're moving towards the end of the show here. I don't know how we've spent 45 minutes on the podcast with you already, but moving towards the end of the show, we want to thank our sponsors, Scratchpad, as well as Sendoso, once again, for helping us out, get this show produced and out there for everybody to enjoy. Andrew, we always wrap up the show by saying, how could we be helpful to you? What question do you have for us?
Well, you guys, everything you guys do is helpful. I was curious, just on a fun note, what you guys wanted to be when you were kids.
Oh, I love this question. Richard, go first. Go first, Richard.
Scott, before I say it, see if you can guess what it was. I don't know if you've ever told you this story.
I definitely don't know. I definitely do not know your answer, but I want to say it's like a fireman or something like that.
That's what I was thinking.
No. I wanted to be a race car driver.
Okay.
I can see that actually.
Right?
Now.
So, you grow up in Macon, Georgia, like you're exposed to, it was the Winston Cup back in the day, right? Before, when cigarettes were allowed to be promoted. Yeah. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I never told my dad or my mom about it. They would always be like, why are you watching racing? Like, it's just a big circle. It's a big left turn circle. And I'm just like, I don't know. I just think it's cool. And they never probed and I never said anything. And one day my dad said, he asked me, like, what did you ever want to be when you were in? I was like, I used to want to be a race car driver. He's like, why didn't you tell me that? I'd have taken you to races and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know. I thought you would have looked down on me. I mean, back in that age, in the 70s and 80s, it was sort of considered this redneck thing, right? It wasn't quite so high end, right? And
right.
And so that was sort of my thought. So
have we reached the stage where NASCAR is no longer redneck?
Yes, absolutely.
This is news to me. Judge away. This is news to me. All I wanted to be was an athlete. I had no idea what that meant, though.
Was a what?
An athlete. I didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't know what sport. I didn't have any grand designs. I was never like career oriented. I was like, I want to be a professional athlete, and that's probably why it didn't really work out, because I never focused on one thing enough to put in the work. But that was it.
Are you naturally athletic?
It migrated a little bit towards like, okay, well, I can coach. Now what I think I want to do, my new plan, Richard, which I should share this with you, is sometime in the next few years, I'm going to throw in the towel on this work thing. I'm going to try to go get a high school soccer coaching job.
Scott, I've been telling you to do this for 10 years.
Yeah, well, I don't have the means to do it. You know how much high school coaches get paid? They get paid nothing.
I know. It's typical.
You said earlier you don't have any losses. It sounds like to me the time is right.
You got to get a lot of gains to survive. If you're gonna do that. But I think that'd be fun way to stay competitive and be in sport.
I can see you doing that. I can easily see you doing that.
Coaching.
Are you naturally athletic, Scott? I know you surf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got.
He is.
Pretty much every sport we could try to go play, and
I will tell you a story that he's naturally left-handed. He came to visit once. We went to play golf. Didn't have a set of left-handed clubs, and he played right-handed, and he held his own.
Nice.
Right, like he didn't blow up and shoot a 140 or anything like that, but he was right around the 100 mark, which for me is good on any day. And, you know, as someone who's playing the opposite hand, I think is outstanding. So he does have this natural body movement mindset. So
I wanted to be a pro wrestler, but as fate would have it, genetics did not really agree with that.
That was my other one too. Like I still follow. Andrew, we should start talking like Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes one day.
Well, you can learn, you know, I've applied wrestling to sales a lot in my career. Like there's a lot of parallels.
I need to have that conversation with
kind
you.
of content from the two of you for the next few days.
Yes.
Race car driving and pro wrestling sales and leadership content.
I've actually never put those two together other than, I mean, I can see some of it from the leadership side and the process and practice, and I can get some of that, but we should jump on another call someday for 20 minutes and record it just to see what comes out of it.
That'd be pure gold. Pure gold.
Well, we appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon, Andrew. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
Keep up
Thanks,
the good
man.
work.
It's been amazing. Great to get to know you.
Same.